You've never had to deal with poverty. I don't know a damn thing about your chastity, but you sure as hell have never been obedient. I'm just supposed to be spying on these people, right? My mom says she knew I was going to be a sister in third grade because I had perfect penmanship. I don't buy it.
Welcome to the Exposing Catholics show, where we expose the lives, interactions, and stories of Catholics. Our guest today is Sister Michelle.
Hi.
Welcome on.
Welcome to you, too. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Awkward.
So can you give a little bit of an intro of you and your background and
Sure.
what you do here at NDCL?
Okay, sure. I'm Sister Michelle. I'm a sister of Notre Dame, which is an international community headquartered in Rome, but here in the United States, our like headquarters is here in Chardon, Ohio. But we're throughout the United States with regions in the Cleveland area, the Toledo area, the Covington, Kentucky area, and around Thousand Oaks, Los Angeles, California as well. But we have sisters in Florida and Maryland and like lots of other places as well. So that's a community that I'm in. My ministry here at NDCL, I'm the assistant principal for student support. And in that capacity, I'm responsible for all of the special ed program and the support systems that we have in place here. I do some teacher supervision, so like observations of teachers, that kind of thing. And I'm part of the administrative team that kind of runs the school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can we dive into what your life looked like as a child,
Sure.
the family dynamic, and where faith was, like your story about faith, but also like what faith looked like within the family?
Sure. So cradle Catholic, born and bred, but also military family. So that's a kind of a unique aspect. My dad was a career Navy man. So I was born in Las Vegas, actually, out by where the training grounds are. So where they set off bombs. That's kind of what that area was. And then we lived really all over the United States and also in Japan. My little brother was born in Japan. And oftentimes my dad was out on ship. So my mom, not at all a single mom at all, but she really raised us a lot of the time when he was off on duty. And so, going to it was CCD then, but PSR. I was not a Catholic school kid. I was a public school kid. But we went to, weekly religion classes and always went to Mass together as a family. Involved, as I got older, involved in CYO activities. And we had what was called Youth Encounter, which would kind of be like Kairos would be today, for those of you that know what Kairos is. Weekend retreat followed by the rest of your life, and the really the fourth day. So the retreat was 3 days, and then the fourth day is the rest of your life, and trying to live out all those key things that you talk about on those kinds of retreats. And that was really an instrumental part of helping me shape who God is in my life and how much really religion is part of community. So initially it's part of family, right? You pray together as a family, you go to church as a family, you try to live the way God calls you to be as a family, and then as you grow, so does your community. So, those teenage years where your friends are way more important than your family, right? So you get involved in those kinds of groups as a teenager, and then, as I moved into adulthood, I found that community in the Sisters of Notre Dame.
And did your family, I don't know, participate is probably not a good word, but I guess participate in Mass in terms of like lectors and altar?
So towards the end of, well, it's not really the end of my dad's career, but at one point in his career, he was stationed to like the Pentagon Crystal City area in Washington, D.C. Then you're not on a ship anymore, right? And we lived in Northern Virginia at that time. And so he was home more. And at that point, we were much more settled. We were older. We weren't little kids anymore. And we got involved. My brother was an altar boy. I was a lector in the choir. CYO was really, it wasn't just sports. That's kind of what you think about CYO now. CYO was really youth group. At that point, we were very involved in that. We took our turns, first my sister and then me and then my brother being, officers in those programs. My dad was on parish council. My mom was in all the women's groups. The grown-up version of Youth Encounter was called, what was it called? Oh my gosh. Well, there was a grown-up version of it. And so she was on those retreats and became a leader in those and helped give those retreats and stuff. So short answer, yes, very involved. And I think one of the things that struck me as a teenager was how the church community was my parents' community. So we had our church community as teenagers, but they had theirs as well. And their friends really became my aunts and uncles in many ways, because my dad's family, my mom's family were all back in Chicago, and we were in Virginia. And these people were the parents of my friends, but they were also really good support system to my family. And so we all knew each other, and we all, there was really a community aspect to it. And, it's that core group that runs the parish, right? I mean, the priest runs the parish, sort of. But really, it was that whole group of adults and this whole group of kids that did all the stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then growing up, then where was that call to become a sister of Notre Dame?
So my mom says she knew I was going to be a sister in third grade because I had perfect penmanship. I don't buy it. I think that's good, hindsight 2020, I think. I think in reality I started thinking about it when I met my confirmation sponsor. So my whole confirmation sponsor thing's a little bit weird. It was a cousin of my dad's who is a BVM sister, Blessed Virgin Mary, in Dubuque, Iowa. That's Iowa, right? Yeah, that's Iowa. And I had no idea who this woman was, but my dad's like, yeah, she's great. She's a nun. She should be your sponsor. Oh, okay. So she came into town just for this.
Oh, wow.
And I thought she was the coolest thing ever. She was a teacher. She was fun. She was, lively. Just really a neat person. And I thought, she's really cool. I like her. Then it was out of my mind. That was 7th grade, done. But then I went to college, and I went to college at LaSalle University, which is in Philadelphia, and it's run by the Christian Brothers. And that's when I really had my first exposure to religious life. I didn't know nuns. I didn't know religious life. I met this cousin, sister person who was great, but I didn't get it, right? I watched these brothers, and I was like, what is that all about? They were fantastic teachers, and I, from the time I was little, the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a teacher. So that whole piece of my vocation, I never really deeply discerned that.
Yeah.
I was going to be a teacher. But they also enjoyed each other, and really seemed to have fun together and pray together and do service together. They prayed beautifully. They led beautiful liturgies. They invited the students to join them at evening prayers and morning prayers, but nobody ever went to morning prayer. That's way too early. But those Vespers and those Advent celebrations, all those things, and they did it well. And I think if I could have been a Christian brother, I would have. I wanted to be part of that. And ever since that youth encounter experience, I had a spiritual director that I would, back in Virginia, that I would meet with, when I was home, and we'd talk and go to confession, all those kinds of things. And throughout my years in college, I would talk to him about, these Christian brothers, oh my gosh, these Christian brothers. But I was also dating and really, I enjoyed my college years and all of those things. Well, by senior year, I was like, and so I did talk to him, and he said, well, what you need to do is go check it out. Go meet a nun, would you? Kind of a thing. And I said, well, I don't know who, and I don't know what do I do? And so he said, well, there's really two groups that are very active in the area. One was the IHMs, the Immaculate Heart of Mary Sisters, and the other was the SNDs. The SNDs had several schools in Virginia. And still being, young and adolescent and a little bullheaded, there was no way I was going to the IHMs because the girls I went to college with had them in high school and didn't like them. I had not met a single one, but I was like, oh, there's no way I want to be part of that. So I decided to apply for jobs where Sisters of Notre Dame worked and spy on them. Check them out, right? So I did. So I applied for a job at St. Anne's in Arlington, and the Sisters of Notre Dame ran that school. And I thought I was the slickest thing ever, right? I'm just checking out the nuns while I'm teaching, which is the only thing I'd ever wanted to do. So in October of that year, we had a faculty meeting, and Sister Joan was the principal. And she was late for the meeting. We're all in the faculty room waiting for her, right? And they're like, Michelle, go and get her. So I, go off to the office, and I'm like, yeah, well, no, we're all waiting for you. Come on. She goes, I still have to run something off. Don't go back. Sit down for a minute so that, just so that I didn't have to explain why she wasn't there yet. And so she's running off these papers, and I'm sitting there, and she goes, and you know what, by the way, when are you going to join our community anyway? I was like exposed, right? I'm like, well, and then I'm supposed to go to this faculty meeting, right? So she said, well, there's this like come and see weekend coming up. It's up in Chardon, Ohio. I'll go with you. We can go up. We can just kind of check it out. And I'm like, it said nothing to my parents, had said nothing to my siblings, nothing to my friends. I'm just supposed to be spying on these people, right? But I just said yes to that. And then we went to a faculty meeting. I can't tell you anything she said at the meeting, but the process just kind of flowed from there. Mm-hmm. So
wow.
I guess I was a little obvious. So much for poker face, right?
We've got something special for all our Catholic organizations. Now, before you skip past this part, it's not an ad. It's more like an incredible opportunity to take your digital presence to the next level. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Something only for our podcast listeners. We, DM Productions, have a 2-day Catholic social media makeover course. It's an online course specifically made for Catholic organizations. It will take your social media to the next level. And we make it easier than ever with our step-by-step video walkthroughs, cheat sheets, customizable templates, and more. Catholic organizations, let's start creating the quality and results that secular businesses have, but with the depth and beauty of Catholicism. Oh, and did I mention the price? $700. But remember I said I was going to let you in on a little secret? Use code DMPodcast to get it completely free. No credit card required. Just pop that code in and you're all set. Head over to www.dm.productions/social media makeover or click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
That's so funny. I mean, yeah. How young were you when that whole process started?
Yeah. So I was a first-year teacher. So
okay.
I don't know, 21, 22.
Got it.
Right out of college.
Mm-hmm.
The discernment process is about a year.
Yeah.
It was then. Can be shorter, can be longer, can be years and years and years. Or it can be, just that short. So I went to that come and see weekend in October and entered the community in August of the following year. Yeah.
Must have been a good experience then.
Yeah, it was. I came up here to Chardon, and they were weekends, and it was this combination of, hey, come and just meet us and see what we're like, and hey, let's have some serious conversations about how God's acting in your life and why you're feeling called, how you're feeling called. So, discernment to become a religious sister is a two-way street. It's not just, hey, I want to do this. It's the sisters saying, hey, this looks like a good fit, so there was a little of that dance going on throughout the year. And you have to be vulnerable, because I could have tried to come and fake this year and say, I got to prove that I want in, right? Well, I wasn't even sure I did want in.
Yeah.
I just wanted to come and see and have those deeper conversations beyond. They're good teachers and they have fun together. There has to be a little bit more to call than that. Even if that's what initially attracts you, there has to be more of, yeah, but what's God saying about that? And oh, by the way, there are these vows and, all those kinds of conversations. And when you enter, you don't walk in the first day saying, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. My formation program was 9 years long. So it's like being engaged for 9 years before you're finally married.
That's crazy. I could never.
And in some ways, it's there are stages. Like I had made what's called temporary vows 5 years before my final vows. So I already considered myself vowed and part of this community. Yeah. It just wasn't finalized yet. That's
that
kind
makes
of an
sense.
Awkward way to say it, but yeah.
So you didn't tell your parents that you were going to this weekend?
Oh no, I told
nobody?
them that. I just hadn't told anybody the day she said, when are you going to join us? So no, I went home and had that conversation.
Got it. And what was their reaction?
So my dad, I love my dad. Both of my parents are passed. So they're hearing this. So Dad, excuse me, exposing everything you said to me. But he said to me, you've never had to deal with poverty. I don't know a damn thing about your chastity, but you sure as hell have never been obedient. That was his answer to me. So, and I know my dad was great, and sharp-witted. He really was. But he was basically like, you know what? You're not coming and telling me you're going to be a nun. You're telling me you're going to go and check out, something. My mom was a little more skeptical. She wanted to go and meet this Joan person, this Sister Joan person. And over time, they actually became friends over this. The Sister Joan actually left our community after I entered. But we've remained very good friends. She's from up here. So I actually get to see her more than if she had been in Virginia. But, she wanted to know more about what is this all about. Many years after I was in the community, they had moved to Texas at that point, and I was down for Christmas, and they were having a vocation thing at the church. And they asked if I'd come, and I thought it was come so that we could do something like this, like talk about this. It was to come to hear my mom talk about what it's like to be the mother of a nun, which was really very interesting, because she said one of her biggest fears was that I would change my name, because sisters can take a new name, right? And she said that she and my father gave me that name at my baptism, and they felt that that baptismal name is what you have been called to be. And so she didn't believe that in the whole you change your name thing. And that was one of her biggest fears. And that, that I would, with every choice, there's a loss. You're even when you're choosing between two really good things, especially when you're choosing between two really good things, there's a loss in there. And so she was like, this wasn't the many years later, back at the time I was discerning, she was like, you're choosing not to have children. And that's a big loss, right? And you're choosing to not have total say in your life. And she was not saying it the way my dad said it, the whole, you sure as hell aren't obedient piece. But she knew that would be a struggle in my life, is to kind of give that over, not just to a person, because you're not obedient to some person. You're obedient to God, sometimes mediated through a person. And she said, these are deep questions, and I'm glad you're not entering a community that says, hey, come and enter, and boom, you're in. She was glad that it was a long process. Yeah. And she was glad that family was involved throughout the whole process. So, they were supportive, skeptical, but supportive. And eventually my mom actually became an associate in our community. So, she became one of my biggest cheerleaders, and had that little bit of my daughter the nun thing towards the end there. So, towards the end of her life, I mean.
What did your siblings think of it?
Yeah, my sister thought I was nuts, and still does. If I would leave the community today, she's like, it's great. You could come home. We'll support you until you get your feet down. It'll be great. And you'd be so much more involved in the kids' lives. And I'm like, your kids are grown people. Like, they don't need me more involved in their life. She doesn't completely get it, but she supports me, and that I think is the key point. My brother wrote me a note. So I was 21, so he was, 19, 18, something like that when I entered. And he wrote me a note that I still had. It was on a little card. It was like this big, that just said, remember, you were my sister first. And every time I think of that, listen to me, I sound like I'm going to cry. And so he just is, he's lovely. He is so wonderful. And his kids are just, they call me and ask for help with their math, and they're always, we miss you, come home to visit. But they understand, and he's just great about it. He really is. And there's a Sister Judy Ostrowski. I don't know if she's going to hear this, but Judy, this is for you. She was at the school where I first taught, that very first year. She was the 8th grade teacher. And then he was an English major and needed to do an internship. And he decided to do an internship in an English classroom. So he connected with her and did it in her classroom. And the two of them clicked like you would not believe. And she did the prayer at his wedding, like not me, him, her. And so there are times that he'll call and say, hey, how's Sister Judy? And I'm like, I'm fine, thanks. And she's great. So no, he has come to really love, many of our sisters, and I know he loves me. And that's same with my sister, even though she still is like, no, you need to leave and come home. She loves me. And so in the support of that has has been fantastic. And extended family too. I mean, we don't have a lot of extended family, and really we lived so far away from everyone. I'm not super close to extended family, but they've always been very supportive of me. I know there are sisters who, that was it. Like, they became sisters and they were like, we're cutting you off. This is ridiculous. Nope. And there are others who, like mine, have just been wonderful. I feel blessed that I'm in that category.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you get to go and see your family?
Yeah, so they're in Texas. It depends. When my mom wasn't well, I went home a lot more often in fact, I took a semester off. That might have been while you were at school here. I took a semester off to go home and kind of take care of her. I didn't really take the semester off. I would fly up for a week each month and get stuff done and check in and, all that kind of stuff. But so really the school community was very supportive of that time. But in general, 2 or 3 times a year, I go down. Christmas, this year it was Thanksgiving, usually in the summer. If there's big things like a graduation or first communion or a new baby or something like that, then I'll go down.
Yeah.
When my mom and dad were living, they would come up a little bit more. My sister and my brother, they've got families, and it's just easier to ship me home than to ship all of them up. But yeah, and they live in Houston, so it's great to go down in the winter because it's it's not always great in July because it's pretty beastly there. Yeah. My sister and her husband also have a house up in Massachusetts now, so that's kind of a fun place to go in the summer. So I do get to see them, and we talk all the time. Yeah. My sister and I are big Instagram send each other stuff buddies.
What do you think it is about the sisters and the need to, that's what I've heard from a lot of people, is that there's this need to go see and then know.
Yeah. Well, I think that sense of now I am at home, because if you're going to live your whole life not feeling at home, something's wrong, right? Yeah. I mean, when I say I'm going home, I mean to Texas to see my family, but my home is in Notre Dame. And I think I really sense that. I've had some international experiences. I served for 3 months in Africa. I've been to some international meetings in Germany and Rome, and like everywhere I go that's Notre Dame, I feel at home. Even if we don't share the same language or culture, there's something about that, and so I think that whole come and see thing, first of all, why would you make a life commitment to any place you haven't seen? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. I mean, I'm sure the two of you dated before you got married, right? And I think that's what come and see means. It's that whole dating thing. It's, am I right for you? Are you right for me? Well, I think that's what's happening in this lifelong relationship with a community. I'm coming to see, are you right for me? And me coming to see is helping you know whether I'm right for you as well. Yeah. So it just kind of makes sense to me. Yeah. I know there's reality TV of married at first sight, but I don't really advocate that. There's something about building a relationship before you make a lifelong commitment, and that's really what I think that's about.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. It's the dance, right? It's the give and take, and the growing honesty. I'm sure in that if I had a videotape of that first weekend, I'm sure some of it was me trying to look a little bit holy and trying to, I'd be really good at the, it's a first date. They're awkward, right? It's the whole, you got to look good and make sure your shirt's straight and, all that kind of stuff. And then the more you do it, the more you become who you really are and show who you really are. And the more you have a good person, like I had someone I was doing the discernment with that can ask the right questions too, right? So I think that discernment's important in all of our lives. It's not just about discernment for vocation. It's about, should we take this new job? Should we move? Should we have a child? Should we, buy a car? I mean, these are all at varied levels, big discernment questions. Yeah. And, not everybody, I don't think at 21 I knew all the right stages of discernment and, what questions to ask and all that. So having someone like a spiritual director or a discernment director is important when you're making those tough decisions. Yeah.
I think spiritual directors are huge, and I don't know if enough people know about them or utilize them in the way that they could be, because only recently, last couple years, I started having a priest as a spiritual director. Yeah. And it initially was just I was going to ask him random questions. Yeah. And I just schedule a meeting and like, let me talk about random things like dinosaurs and just just random stuff.
Yeah.
And
like on which day of creation were dinosaurs created, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he's like, there's this, like, we could make this an actual official thing where it's like spiritual direction.
Yeah.
And it's a little more structured than just you coming in and talking about dinosaurs. And
I think that can happen with a confessor as well. There's some people who they go to confession regularly, but it's not a relationship. And sometimes the confessor relationship can morph into real spiritual direction as well. Because there is a difference between just celebrating the sacrament of reconciliation and having like those deeper conversations about how is God acting in your life. Yeah.
Well, he was the person doing confession.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense, right? Because you have kind of bared your soul. Okay, like here's who I am. Okay, well now maybe we could take it a step further and just talk about deeper questions that aren't necessarily leading to sin. They're just deeper questions, right? And they're you can maybe help me ask the right questions of myself to guide my life. And
just learning more about the Catholic faith too. It's like,
for sure,
I don't, I've been Catholic my whole life, but I don't know a whole lot about it. So just, learning from somebody that's educated and then can give, proper advice and like answers to all the questions that I have.
That's not just saying what they think would be a good answer to it. That's like, hey, maybe they actually know the catechism.
Exactly. Yeah.
Concept. that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I agree.
A reliable
and are
resource.
Trained. Like not even everybody that's knowledgeable in the doctrine of Catholicism is a good spiritual director. So there's that combination of all those skills that makes someone really both qualified and good for you. Because someone who's really good for you might be lousy for you and terrible for me, or might be fantastic for any one of us.
Right. Are sisters required to have a spiritual director? I think priests.
No.
Do priests have to have a spiritual director? I know they go and talk. Thanks. But
I don't know either for priests, quite honestly. But sisters are not required. Okay. I know many of us do. Just processing life is a good thing, but no, it's nobody's coming to me with a checklist saying, do you have a spiritual director? Do you go to church every Sunday? There's not a, you must do this and this and this kind of a list. And if there is, it's not on that list.
Do you have an intense prayer life? Like, are you a early morning type of?
Yeah. I have a prayer. Intense that's a big word. I think my life goes through phases of intensity. There are times that can be rough, and so my prayer life gets pretty intense. And there are times that can be rough, and so my prayer life gets really dry. And I think there's that whole how God is acting in my life. I try to be very faithful to prayer, and I think sometimes I fail in that, and sometimes I'm really good at it. So the rhythm of my prayer. I am horrible in the mornings. Horrible in the I like if I can get that 2 extra minutes, I will tell Alexa, give me 2 more minutes, and she will do it. She is my she's my slave on that kind of stuff. So my morning prayer tends to be in the car on the way to school. There's a prayer app called Pray As You Go. It's put out by the Jesuits in England, so they have these really cool accents. I really like it. But it's really around it's a Lectio Divina, that prayer style around one of the readings of the day. And my drive-in, I live in the inner city of Cleveland, and I work in Chardon. So I got a good 35 to 40 minutes. So I do that, and I listen to a morning prayer app, and then I just try and do some chill music that will get me like ready for the day, so that I'm not walking in ready to kill anybody who talks to me. I'm not a coffee person, so that prayer is my morning coffee that kind of gets me ready for the day. I do spiritual reading, but I do not do it on an everyday basis. Some of our sisters are really good about spiritual reading every single day for a certain amount of time. I'll get really into a book and like immerse myself forever, and then not have anything for a little while, and then I'll find another good one. So that's true. We pray evening together as a local community. We're on different schedules, so morning prayer I'm so grateful that we don't, because I'm just so bad. So we pray evening prayer together. I always pray night prayer before I go to bed. Some nights that really helps me put the day away so that I can sleep. Because if I don't put the day away, then 3 a.m. my brain is functioning entirely too well. So it's that prayer's an everyday part of my life. But I really also believe in the whole pray always. St. Paul talks about pray always. And I find myself all day, praying about a kid that just walked in and told me something really hard, just stopping for a minute and praying, or praying with them. Can we pray about that? And I think sometimes that's why the kid shows up at my office, because I'm not a counselor here, but sometimes I think what they really want is for someone to pray for them, or just to say silently, help that kid, or thank you. Just that moment of stopping and kind of throwing my eyes up and saying thank you when something really great happens. Julie Billiard is St. Julie Billiard, founded the Sisters of Notre Dame of Namur, which were the cousins of, so she's kind of our spiritual mother. It's a whole structural thing. But anyway, St. Julie Billiard had this expression, how good is the good God? And without ever knowing who she was, my mother would often say, isn't God good? Like when something good would happen, she'd say, isn't God good? And that's kind of become part of who I am. And then I hear about this woman who said, oh, how good is the good God? And I thought, there it is, and so I think that's part of the fabric of who I am, isn't God good? And recognizing that in my life, which I think is part of prayer.
Now, why don't you live up the street?
Several reasons. First of all, I used to minister downtown.
Okay.
So I was the assistant principal at St. Francis downtown, and then I was the principal at St. Thomas Aquinas, which is just less than a mile from the house where I live now. And when I had the opportunity to minister here, I could have moved, but there's something about living and ministering in the city that continues to pull at my heart. The parish that I belong to is St. Agnes Our Lady of Fatima, which is no offense to any of the other Black parishes in the Cleveland diocese, but it's by far the most vibrant and alive Black Catholic community in the city. I'm in the gospel choir there, and those are my people. It's my favorite thing that I do, is being part of that parish and in that choir. And I didn't want to lose that. At the time, I was also part of the diocesan prison ministry. We had to stop that during COVID. We weren't allowed in, and I have not gone back to it since COVID. There's a part of me that really is starting to feel the desire to do that. I went at Easter. We went to the jail, the women's jail, downtown for Easter Mass, and that's a part of our brothers and sisters that we need to never forget are there. And I didn't want to lose that in my ministry either. So I stayed put. And it's now been, I've been here at NDCL, I think 13 years. And so that's a big piece of it. The other piece is really up the hill is more and more of a retirement community, a vibrant, active, alive, retirement community. I'm not ready to live in a retirement community yet. The day will come, but I'm just not there yet. So, for those reasons.
When you started your, becoming a sister, what did that look like, from day one and then moving forward? You made your decision, what happens?
So, first thing was I had to move up here, right? Because this is where formation is. So, the very first stage when I was in, it's a little bit different now, but the very first stage was called postulancy. Now we have a little bit more of a candidate time period. I would kind of consider that year when I was doing the come and visit. That would but I was a postulant, and we had 2 years of postulancy. One we called the down the hill postulants, and one the up the hill postulants. So there's a little house on the property right by NDCL. It's a little house where the down the hill postulants lived, and it was really that first year of still very involved in like I had a job. I worked at St. Anselm's. I was a teacher there, but living here, but not up in the big convent. So we did our prayers as a small group. We went up the hill to the big convent for like Sundays and for Mass and things like that. But it was still kind of a transitional year. And then we became up the hill postulants, and so we moved up the hill into the provincial center up the hill, and we lived in the novitiate even though we were still postulants. So we weren't, we were still had a ministry that year. I worked at St. Margaret Mary's in South Euclid and drove there and back, but we were much more involved in the larger community for morning prayer and evening prayer and meals and those kinds of things. And then I became a novice, and I was the first person to not wear a habit. So the novices the year ahead of me wore the habit and were invested, and that was in, July, and then that September was when the sisters had permission to go out of the habit. So I was the first one to become a novice without wearing the habit.
So you've never worn
Never wore the habit. Nope. So I became a novice, and in that first year, you're what's called a canonical novice. So it's governed by canon law. Yeah, canonical novice. So it's governed by canon law. So there are certain things you can and can't do in that year. Like you can only be out of the novitiate house a certain number of days, and you're not in ministry, you're studying the vows and the constitutions and all those things. It's really a more intense year of preparation. And then the second year of your novitiate, you're an apostolic novice. So now you're out doing the apostolate. So you're back in ministry. And so I was back to teaching. I taught at Metro Catholic that year. And then you take first vows, and they're temporary. We did it, I think we did 3 years and then 2 years. Now they do it every year. So they renew their vows every year until final vows. And then I made my final vows, and right at the time I went, the period right before final vows is called the tertian program, tertian 3, right? So it was the 3 months right before. So we stepped out of ministry and kind of did like a mini canonical year. So, review and drill of the vows and the constitutions and ministry and community and prayer and all those things right before final vows. I was extremely blessed to be able to do mine in Rome. So I got to spend those 3 months in Rome with a great director and getting to know our international community. And that was fantastic. And then I came back and made final vows, which was a great big day. And my dad and mom threw me, my wedding reception kind of thing, this great big vow party, and all my friends came and people that I ministered with, and we even cut a cake, and it was just great. It was a wonderful celebration. And then you continue and you live your life, right? And so it's now been 25 years since my final vows. I'm gonna be an old lady.
You've mentioned a few different ministries that you've been a part of. Can you kind of paint the picture about the inner city prison ministry, and then we'll touch on the other ones?
Sure. So the group that I was involved in was a women's spirituality group, and it took place at what's called the Pre-Release Center, which is very badly named because it's actually a women's prison. I think it was for zoning reasons that it was called a Pre-Release Center. So it's before they're released, but some of them have been there 40 years. So but it's a women's prison. And it was a voluntary group that there's like an activity period that they have, and these women chose to be part of this women's spirituality group. Catholic, not Catholic, Christian, not Christian, predominantly Christian, but just women of lots of different faiths who came together. We tended to do it kind of a round of a combination book study, faith sharing group. There were a group of about 4 or 5 not inmates, visitors that would come and just meet with the women and have these meetings. And quite honestly, I got as much more out of it than I think I gave. It was a beautiful sharing and seeing how God is acting in the lives of women who are incarcerated, many of them for many years. It was touching to see how they saw God acting in their lives behind barbed wire. It was beautiful, and their desire to stay connected to their families, their children, and to try to stay faithful to, it was not a lot of beating of breasts of the bad things they had done. We all acknowledge that we're all sinners, and some sin to the point of having to make restitution for it. And some of them in prison for things that right now are no longer even illegal. A lot of drug charges and things that, marijuana is now legal, and there's people that are going to be in jail for many more years because of marijuana charges. Like that kind of stuff just tugged at me. But to see how God was acting in them and their willingness to share it and want to grow even deeper was just beautiful to me. And like I said, yeah, I was the minister, but no, they were the ministers way more than I was. It was weekly. We went on Monday nights. So I'd go home and go to evening prayer and grab something to eat real quick, and then shoot down to the prison. And yeah, it was every week. I probably did it for maybe 8 or 9 years. It was an important part of my life for a while. Having COVID come just kind of crushed that. Yeah. And it was really right after COVID that my mom wasn't real well. So I was doing a lot of back and forth, and I just have not gotten back into it. And I was invited to come for the Easter Mass. And I was like, yeah, I haven't done that in a long time. I want to do it. And then I went and I was like, oh, why am I not doing this anymore? So I'm beginning to feel that tug, and I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now I'm saying, and I'm part of the Diocesan Prison Ministry, so we'll see what happens with that in the next month or so.
Were there any standout moments that like really you saw somebody that just, I don't know, maybe they weren't following God at all or didn't believe, and then there was a huge transformation?
Yeah, I would have to say no, because they had already made the decision to join this group. There were a lot of other things they could have chosen to do. I will say, like, there was a moment when someone who had never spoken, like, there's no requirement to talk at these things, and there, some weeks we'd have 10 or 12 people there. Some weeks we'd have 25, I mean, there was a young woman. I won't, disclose what her life was, but really she was in college when she was sent to jail at John Carroll University, when she was sent to prison and faced some time, and she never talked. And just, she listened intently. Like, you could see she was very intelligent. You could just see it, and that she was listening intently. And then the day came that she didn't tell her story. Like this really wasn't this wasn't the venue for that. Let me tell you the entire history of why I'm here. But she talked about how she saw God in her life that week. And I remember the 4 of us that were there when we walked out, and you have to go through a whole thing to get into the jail, and then you have to get a whole thing to get out, and switching of the IDs and the metal detectors, and then they have to buzz you out, and then they have to buzz you out again, and there's this whole thing. Well, when we were finally outside the outside gates, one of the women turned and said, "She talked," and we all knew exactly what she meant. And it was like this moment in the parking lot for the 4 of us that was just like, that was just, it was so great. It was just so great, and she really did open up. From that point, and really became an active part of the group. So yeah, that happened.
Where did you say the other mission trip? You took one to
Africa. Yeah. So I had the opportunity. A sister that was in Covington, Kentucky, wanted to come home for her vows. Not for her vows, for her jubilee, which is her anniversary party. So it was her 50th jubilee as a sister, and she wanted to come home to celebrate for it. But she was the head principal of a high school in Africa, and I had the opportunity to go and take her place and also to teach her classes. I got there and was like, this doesn't make sense that I'm the principal here, right? So there was another sister who was like the assistant principal. I was like, you're in charge. Let me know what I can do to help, right? I mean, that was just crazy. But the teaching of the classes was fantastic, and just having that opportunity to be part of us internationally. And again, in the convent there, immediately I was at home, and I was living with sisters that were American, but also sisters that were African. I mean, there was a combination of both living in the convent, and it was like, it didn't take a month to settle in. It took a week to settle in. Once my body was on their time, we were up and running. And part of that was because, like, day 2, I was teaching a class. It wasn't like I had this whole let's just get get acclimated for a while. It was, let's go. So, you know, and it was another one of those opportunities where I think I learned maybe more than I gave. I hope I gave the kids stuff, you know, in the time I was there, but I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about myself, and about, you know, like, what's it like to live in the bush in Africa? I mean, we were miles from anything. You know, we weren't like in some big thriving town. We were out in nowhere. So, you know, can I take cold showers? Is that okay? Can I deal with that? And it was like, yeah, you can do that. You know, can I eat this food that I have no idea what I'm putting in my mouth? Yeah, I can do that. You know, like I figured out, you know, where my limitations were, and you know, what does it take to get homesick, and what does it take to get out of being homesick, and you know, because the internet was not really a thing there. About once a week, they would turn on the electricity for about an hour. And at that point, we could jump on the internet and send emails or whatever. And I had an old iPad at that point, and I'd charge it and be able to use it for a little while. You know, like it was seriously, it was like an hour a week of electricity. Yeah,
Wow.
it was pretty bush. Now I know it's been a while since I was about 10 years ago, so I know things have changed a little then. But it was a great experience. Yeah.
I guess the same question with, like, was there any standout kids that you saw, or like?
So it was a boarding school. So there were two things I think that stood out. One was the first visiting day that I was there for. So their parents, once a trimester, were able to come and visit, right? And they came, so as the headmistress, because remember, I was the headmistress, my job was to collect tuition on that day. Tuition was beans. Okay, they actually came with bags of beans, and there was a measured scoop, and we had to scoop a certain number of beans for each of the children. So they would bring these bags, and we'd scoop them. Because I was the headmistress, had to scoop the bags, right? So that experience of paying because you know, almost every meal was beans and rice and beans. You know, posho and beans. That was the meal, very often. Like that people were paying tuition in beans. It helped me realize how much raising money in the United States was really supporting the missions, you know, because you can't really run a school on beans. You can feed the kids on beans, but you can't run a school on beans. So it made me realize that. And also seeing, the high school was a girls' school. The lower school was girls and boys, but the high school was all girls. To see these girls that were incredible leaders. I mean, they were, you know, they had like head girl that was in charge of their, I mean, these girls were leaders, and they were becoming more and more leaders. When their fathers came, they became very subservient. Like, they knelt before their fathers when their fathers came to greet them, and their fathers would like do a blessing on them. But they knelt to give their father they served their father their meals, and the mothers served as well. And then when the boys, you know, brothers and sisters and fathers and uncles or whatever, when they had all been served, then the women would feed themselves. You know, like, so to see this shift in these like strong leader, powerful women, you know, as soon as the men were there, you know, and it made me realize why we have an all-girls school there, is so that potential can rise in them, which was powerful to see. I think the other one was we did I was teaching English, and the book that we read was about the I can't remember what the name of the book was. That's terrible, but it was about the war in Rwanda. Right, and it was a story about hiding the Hutus or the Tutsis. That was the war in Rwanda was two tribes against each other, and it was a genocide. And so, you know, people that would hide the people of the other, we related it a lot to people who hid the Jewish children during the Holocaust. So it was that kind of a story. Yeah. And it took place. It was the main character in the story. It's a true story. Is a girl about their age. The girls that were reading the book. So very powerful. And we decided to show them the movie Hotel Rwanda, which I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's very, very powerful. It obviously takes place during that time, and it's a man who owned a hotel who hid the people that were being slaughtered. And so we decided to show them the movie, right? Americans deciding to show them this movie, which was made in America, but it takes place in Rwanda. And so we rolled in the TV that was like this big, right? And they all, 60 girls all crowded around to watch this movie. And I'm very used to Americans who are very used to watching movies, and there's violence, and they watch the movies, right? It came to the scene where there was a shooting. They came in and started shooting people. And I mean, really, the screen was this big. These girls like dove under the tables. They were terrified during this scene. And I was like, I have just encountered a culture that is not desensitized to violence. Like we had to kind of like stop the movie and say, okay, girls, this took place in Hollywood, and everybody's okay, and they're just showing, and it was horrible and it was terrifying, but these people are okay. It was we had to explain that. And there's a scene in the movie where he's hiding these children and their sisters, like nun sisters, who are caring for them. Like they're from I think it was an orphanage, and there are Native sisters and European sisters, so white and black sisters caring for them in this hotel. And at one point the UN shows up, and everybody thinks, oh, we're saved. They've come to help rescue us. And the truth is they came to help the Europeans that were there, not just the sisters, but the Europeans who were at the hotel escape, and were leaving all the Rwandans behind because they didn't have like authorization to take the natives. So the white sisters didn't want to go. They didn't want to leave the children. And the African sisters were like, no, go, save yourself, tell the world what's happening here, but go. And they do. They leave. And we were all sitting out on the porch. There's like a porch by the classrooms a couple days later. And a little group of kids, they were like sophomores in high school, came up to me and said, I remember her name was Prudence, came up to me and said, now, sister, if there was a genocide here, would you abandon us like they did? Like what do you say to these children? So my answer, I kind of did that whole 30-second prayer thing, like, God, please give me the right words. My answer to them was, I hope I would have the courage to be a martyr for you because I love you so much, but I don't know if I would. And they were like, that's fair, and then went off. And I was like, oh, thank God, that's fair. Because I just, what do you say?
Yeah, exactly.
I could not honestly say to them, oh yeah, no, I would never abandon you, never. I think I'd stay for you, but I don't know. So yeah, those were two moments that I will never forget.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they speak English?
Yeah, they did.
School?
They were they had to it went from preschool all the way through high school. The little ones, like I said, they were co-ed, and then the older ones were just girls. They start boarding in third grade. So K12 was really just the village kids from around, and they spoke more in their own language. In third grade, they had to speak English. And if they got caught speaking their tribal language, they'd get in trouble, which usually meant they had to go sit on the grass or something, like timeout kind of a thing. So that happened in third grade. By the time they were in like our equivalent of ninth grade, they were pretty good. Yeah. They really were. Now, were there times that we could hear them, in their clusters speaking in their own language? Absolutely. I would expect we would all do the same, right?
What else are you going to do?
But yes, all of our classes were taught in English. We spoke English, They had a class in the lower school called Traditional. Like that was the name of the class, Traditional. I was like, traditional what? Like, what are they doing? And they did things like traditional music, traditional arts. So they learned their culture, in that class. And in that class, they often spoke the tribal language, but not all the time. And they had songs that were in their tribal language, but they were required to take their classes in English, which gave them, the national language in Uganda, this was in Uganda, the national language is English, but if you're living in your tribes all the time, you're not speaking English. So it was important for them to succeed in society to have that English.
Do you know any of their language?
By the time I left there, I had some greetings. It's gone. I think if I went back, it would come back.
Yeah.
But it's the same as we lived in Japan when I was a little. Like we moved there when I was 6 months old. We were there till I was 3. My mom says I spoke Japanese fluently with so military officers who live abroad have a native housekeeper usually. So we had a housekeeper. My mom was like, I was jabbering away in Japanese. I got nothing now. But again, they say that if you were to study it, it would come. So maybe I should go take Japanese or something. But no, I don't know the language.
Have you ever gone back to Japan to say it?
No, I haven't.
No?
My brother was born there. He really wants to go back. I don't really have a great desire. I'd rather go to some of the other places where our sisters are. I'd love to go to India. I would love that, or Brazil. Those are two of the places where our sisters are that I would just love to go and visit.
Mm-hmm. So. As like a sister, are you able to be like, can I take a vacation over there?
Well, over there would be like really expensive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have what's called a personal budget, and out of that can come your vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I could never afford. I mean, I would have to save up for a long time to go. But there are opportunities. Like there are some international meetings that happen. That's how I got to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
While we were in Germany, we were able to go to Holland and see the sisters there, and France, where like Julie Billiard was. Like I said, I was in Rome. So I've had some really great opportunities.
Yeah.
But will I take more if they're offered? Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that would be awesome.
So much fun. We really want to go,
Where?
travel abroad to the Holy Land and to see the Vatican and all these other places.
Yeah. Don't miss Rome. Rome's amazing. Yeah.
When you're in Africa and it's like off the grid, and it really was.
Yeah.
Is there a different type of relationship that you can grow with God?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, that whole distraction thing. My biggest distraction is my phone. Isn't your busy? I mean, like whose isn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's not there 24/7, then it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sit down to pray, does my watch vibrate? Yeah. I mean, like I have to turn it off, Michelle. Like I have to. There's such an effort that has to go into that was not there.
Yeah.
I will say that there was. Much more of a communal prayer that was going on. And like we prayed morning prayer together. We went to Mass in the morning together. We prayed evening prayer together. Like there was much more communal prayer there than I experience here. And without all of those distractions, I loved that. But I think the personal prayer happened as well too. There's a silence that descends in Africa when the sun goes down. Birds and monkeys, you can hear them every now and then. But there's a deep silence and a darkness outside. Like it is dark. So to like go outside and look up at the stars in Africa it's like life changing, and the immensity of it and the smallness of me. I really felt that deeply. And that God made all of this, but loves me. I am like this speck of a nothing in relation to all of creation, but I'm hanging on God's refrigerator. Like my picture's on God's refrigerator. God loves me. And I think I felt that really deeply, especially because, there were fantastic sisters there. I had a great time. But we weren't lifelong friends, and they weren't my family. And it was a fantastic, and I'm still very much in touch with some of them. And every now and then there's an opportunity to actually see one. It's like which is so fabulous. But it still wasn't that depth of relationship you have with somebody that you've known your whole life for many, many years. So what's your deepest relationship? Well, then it's God, right? So your all day, everyday companion. Mine was God, and really the dependency on God. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm teaching in a different culture. Help. I'm trying to navigate just like how to be and who to be. Help. I did a lot of help, when I was there, and also a lot of like affirming, like you're okay. You've got this. Yeah. And that I felt that coming from God. So yeah, there was a different intensity that you try to hold on to when you come back, but Jesus also said you can't stay on the mountaintop, right? So at those times that Rome was the same way. I'm in Rome. Good grief. We got to go to Assisi. We got to go to Subiaco. Like these are holy places. Yeah. And there were moments of, wow, God is here. But I had to come off the mountain and get back to work too. So to hold on to those and to know that they can carry you through the times when you're not sure, God, are you even there? Say, you were on Subiaco once. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. God is definitely real. You were once a speck in the vastness of an African sky. Yeah, God exists. You're good. You're good. So those are amazing moments. Those mountaintop moments. Yeah.
I guess I want to hear about Rome too. Like, you tell me about the other ones.
Well, I'll tell you my favorite place in Rome.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a place called St. John Lateran, which is so you think of the Vatican as being like the seat of the Pope, right? The actual the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. So, like we have our bishop and his cathedral is St. John's downtown, right? The Vatican is not the Pope's cathedral. It's St. John Lateran. That's the seat of the diocese in Rome. So the Vatican is like the seat of the Church of the world, but St. John Lateran is okay. So anyway, that's what St. John Lateran is, and it's a beautiful church. It's lovely, but there's the baptistry there, and way back in the day, like so this is an ancient church. This church goes back to not too long after Paul was actually in Rome. You couldn't step into the church unless you were baptized. So the baptistry was in a building outside of the church. So you were baptized there before you could ever go into the real church. And I don't even know what it is about this baptistry. It's this small building. It's octagonally shaped, which is the eighth day is eternity. So God created the world 7 days. The eighth day is eternity. So that's why traditionally a baptistry was octagonal in shape. So the font is this big octagonal pool. And it's lovely, but it's not, like knock your socks off lovely. But there's something, I walked in and was like something happened there, and there's this very long, I probably couldn't right now anyway. At one point I had the whole thing memorized, but it's this very long saying that is etched in Latin all the way across the top of it that I didn't know what it said. I had taken Latin in high school, so I could pick out some words, but I didn't know what it said, but I wanted to know what it said. And yes, I am this old. It was walking around with the internet in your hand, right?
Yeah, my first thought is Google Translate.
Just look it up, right? Yeah. Or just even don't even bother with Google Translate. Just what does the baptistry say? It'd be so easy. Instead, I went. The first time I went with a group. We were like a little group. I went back by myself. With a Latin to English dictionary and figured it out. And it was like an entire afternoon because my Latin was pretty rusty and looking up all these words and figuring it out. And then at one point I actually found what the translation was, and I was pretty close, so I was pretty proud of myself. But the first line is, "Here is born in spirit-soaked fertility a brood destined for another city." And I mean, if you really kind of slow it down and look at that, it's, right here in this, at your baptism, you become part of a group that's not destined to be here. This is not where we're called to be. We're called to be in heaven, and so you're born here, and then the whole rest of your life is that journey to heaven. And I actually had that prayer, that whole thing, the correct translation, not my translation, said at my final vows, to bless holy water that then we used to sprinkle the entire congregation before my vows. It was that meaningful to me. And I've always loved that place. And just last year, I was part of what we call our general chapter. Every 6 years, delegates from all over the world come to kind of set the course for the next 6 years and to set goals and all those kinds of things. And that was in Germany. But then we got to go to Rome afterwards. And I just kept saying, I don't care where we go, but can we go to the Lateran? Can we go to the Lateran? So she was like, yes, we'll go to the Lateran. Good grief. This was somebody who was helping give tours. So we went. And I said, do you know what that says up there? And they were all like, what? I said, look, it's in Latin. Yeah, it was like this whole, I was was in my element. It was, and it had been 20 some years since I had been there. And I pulled it out because I have it in the notes app in my phone, and I started to read it, and I started to cry in the middle of it because it's just so meaningful to me. And they were all so kind, like, oh, yeah, I don't think they got it, because there was something about it that struck me. So that's like one of my holy places in the world is St. John Lateran. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of the sisters like, she's from India, so sweet. She's like, I really should take your picture here. And I said, okay, you can take my picture. It was so sweet. It was great. It was a wonderful moment. Yeah. Yeah, you need to go to Rome. I can see. You've already got the Rome bug. Yeah.
I'm like picturing in my mind.
Well, now you know that when you go, you need to say, do you think maybe we could go to St. John Lateran? But make sure you ask to see the baptistry. Because if you go to Lateran, you'll be like, yeah, it's a beautiful Roman church. No, you got to go to the baptistry.
Oh my gosh. We got to go. Plan a trip.
Do it.
I had a question, but I can't really remember where I was going with it.
Because you're wrapped up in spirit-soaked fertility.
For real.
Oh, that was kind of what it had to do with, is that I could tell that there's this grace and this happiness that kind of just comes off you as you're speaking about the different things and the mission trips and just the sisters in general.
Yeah.
What, say somebody is considering becoming a sister.
Sure.
For you, it was visiting, and I've heard from other people that is also visiting.
Yeah.
But what if they're not to the visiting part yet?
Yeah.
They're
like
not.
what gets them to come to the visiting?
Yeah. Talk to somebody. I'm a strong believer in spiritual direction and in discernment. And I think, doing discernment by yourself, there's some elements that certainly you have to do by yourself, right? But, the devil's busy. He's not done trying to screw things up in our lives, right? He's a busy guy, and can get in the way of a lot of our own personal decision making when we're doing it all on our own. I think talking to friends, and not letting them necessarily talk you out of it, but allowing them to say, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? Or, Michelle, I've seen that in you for years, of course. Like allowing that confirmation to happen, or that maybe that struggle to happen. At some point, you need to talk to family. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first conversation, but again, allow that give and take to happen. I think do it like you do it like you're buying a car. What are the pros and cons, right? Why am I even thinking about this? Where is this call coming from? What is it about being a sister or a priest or a married person or a single person? What is it about this that attracts me?
Yeah.
Like, why? If it's just, I like the idea of being called sister, it's probably not I like the outfits they wear, probably not the best reason to make a life decision, so to start to look at those and to see which ones are really pulling me and which ones are just kind of stuff, but I think the biggest thing is to talk to people, and now especially, a little different than when I entered, do your research. Where do they minister? If the only thing you've ever wanted to do in your entire life is drive a taxi cab, and you want to enter a community that doesn't drive taxi cabs, might not be the best connection, But if you feel called to the ministry that group is doing, well, that might be another thing in the pro column, There's not a taxi cab was a really bad example. It's not like you can only do this or this to be in religious communities. There are some that are a little bit more dedicated to certain ministries than others, but we have people doing a lot of really cool things in the world. I don't want to say just a teacher, because that's the only thing I've ever wanted to do, right? But we have right now we have a junior professor sister who's studying mental health nursing. That's pretty out of the box, right? We have people doing parish ministry. We have people doing ecology work. People doing spiritual direction and giving retreats. And there's just a lot of things you can do. It's not, in order to be a sister of Notre Dame, you must be a third grade teacher. That's just not the reality of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, you can do an awful lot of research. I went to spy on the nuns, right? Now, mine lasted like 3 months before I got like called out. But, I do your homework, check it out. But at some point, come and see, because nobody's going to take you without coming and seeing. Like, there's not like sign up day. It's not like, on Tuesday, the 3rd in February is the day you sign up to be a nun. I mean, that's just not how it works. So at some point, the come and see's got to happen, because if you don't feel that at homeness, something's wrong. There's not a good connect.
Yeah. And
that doesn't mean you're not called to be a sister. Maybe it just means you're not called to be a sister of the Immaculate Heart, or a BVM or an SND, whatever. There's lots of communities with lots of different charisms and lots of different ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think the part about the devil, he's always at work, and especially with vocations, because, I mean, when I was thinking about proposing and thinking about this whole engagement thing, getting married, then all of a sudden, maybe I should be a priest, but never before. And I've heard this story from other people and from friends about there's this weird like seed that gets planted about, no, maybe you're supposed to be a priest actually. And they go talk to people, they talk to a spiritual director, and most times it actually comes out to be, that's from the devil, because he doesn't want you to enter the priesthood. He wants to distract you.
Right. 100%.
And get you off your vocation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and it's, again, that whole, should I propose or should I be a priest? You're choosing between two good things, right? I mean, it's not like, well, this way is the holier way. Yeah. So, but it's no, this is what God is calling you to do. And the devil's going to get in the way of that all the time. It's not about him wanting to have people in the priesthood who shouldn't be here. I mean, that wasn't it. It was, I don't want you to do what God wants you to do. And I'll do anything I can. Sometimes it comes in that whole, well, no, maybe it should be this. Sometimes it comes as fear. Like, this is just way too scary. Fear very often is of the devil. Sometimes fear's of God, because it, like, maybe you shouldn't be jumping off that mountain. Fear could be helping you make a wise choice, But I think very often it's right from the devil, saying, maybe if I get them to be too scared to do it, then they won't do it. Anything to not do what God wants you to do, that's of the devil.
What are some fears that people might have going into, like, considering being a sister, but, like, you can kind of break those and say, that's not true. You don't need to be afraid of that.
Right. There's not much that I would say that's not true. I mean, unless they're saying, don't you, like, kneel on coals? Or, I mean, like, if it's some wacky idea of something we do. I think the fear comes more in, like, what if this isn't what I'm called to do and I don't find out until it's too late for me to have kids? Or what if, what if this really isn't coming from God and I'm faking this and like, I'm just pretending that I have this? Like, how do I know that? Yeah. I'm afraid that this isn't real. And I think the more you're honest about it, the more you can start to say, I mean, over time, if you're having honest conversations, you begin to say, I was not honest with that conversation at all. And then you are, faking it, but I think it really is about truth, because fear and truth don't ever exist well together. Truth brings peace. Sometimes it gets rocky on the way to peace, but truth brings peace. It's the truth will set you free, right? Fear is very binding. There's no freedom in fear. So I think the more there's an at peaceness with the struggle, at peaceness with the decision making, the more it's not fake. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it was good.
And
I kind of got lost in the middle of that one.
Going along those lines, what advice would you give to yourself if you were like talking to your younger self?
Yeah. Wow, what a great question, Dom. I think part of it goes to be honest quickly. I think I did a little bit of that, like posing a bit in the beginning. So the more honest you are, sooner the easier the whole journey is. I think, I think this is just advice I'd give to pretty much anybody. Military kids, I think, in many ways fall into two categories. Well, they fall into a million categories, but in terms of this, two categories. One is, you know, you're going to move quickly, so don't bother making friends. You know, because you're just going to end up moving again anyway, right? The other is, you know, you're going to move quickly, so you better hurry up and make friends quite fast. You know, because you're not going to have a lot of time, and if you're going to have friends, you better do it quick. You know, I kind of fell into that second category. You know, I kind of am like, okay, let's do this relationship thing. We can do this, right? You know, hurry up. And so I was willing, and I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm saying this is. I jumped in pretty quick to the relationship piece. Like I made friends with the sisters quickly, and was willing to kind of be out there quickly. That helps. You know, because oftentimes you're leaving your family to come and do this journey. Sometimes it's a pretty big distance, but sometimes it's just in terms of you don't quite have the freedom to just pop home for Sunday dinner, or, you know, like that kind of thing. You're making commitments to another relationship, kind of like getting married, right? It changes your relationship with your family. If you don't create the human relationships at the same time, this life can be lonely. You know, I mean, yes, me and God for sure. But God didn't make 7 billion people on 7 billion islands. He put us in this world with other people. And so we need relationships with people. And so find your people, you know, and in a religious community, you know, your people tend to be your sisters. You know, I mean, I certainly have some very, very good friends who are not sisters, and I'm certainly very close to my family. But, you know, get your tribe together, because you need that in life. Everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's so good.
Catholic education plays a huge role in the church in general, but how do you see specifically at NDCL and maybe any of the different Catholic schools that you've been at, how do you see evangelizing them, what's your, not tactics, but how do you approach evangelizing those students? I mean, because there's even people that have no faith that attend Catholic schools because they like the environment.
Yeah, and I found that even more in the inner city than I do at NDCL. You know, NDCL is predominantly Catholic. You know, the kids are predominantly Catholic. At the school where I was principal, Bishop Pilla actually had an expression that said, "We're not here because they're Catholic. We're here because we're Catholic." And so that's kind of the mindset out of which we ministered in those schools. In terms of like, how do we bring them to God, right? Well, we bring them to God by sharing God. I mean, that's how, you know, we certainly aren't like God pressing, you know, like all day, every day, it's all about God. You know, it is all day, every day, and it is all about God, but it's not a forcing, it's an inviting. And so we do things like have a beautiful space for God. You know, I mean, the number of times I walk by this chapel and a kid's just sitting in here, you know, and just like, nobody made him come. Nobody said, okay, at 2:00 we're having, you know, it's just a kid who said, I just want to go sit in chapel for a little bit. I mean, that, if we didn't have this space, how could they do that? So you create spaces, you know, you do create opportunities. You know, you have kairoses and masses and adoration and opportunity for reconciliation. And so you provide, you open the doors, and you put key people in some key roles. You know, like you get good campus ministers who are welcoming, and we call them kid magnets. You know, like if they're people that you don't want to be around, why would you expect people to be around, right? I think that's true for religious life as well as Catholic education. Like, if you have a bunch of crabby nuns who hate what they're doing, why would you want to join that, right? So I think joy is part of evangelization. I think, you know, we try to show that we are, and witness to the fact that we believe in God and God's core to our lives, and that Catholicism helps guide that and is part of who we are. And if we're miserable, awful, mean people and saying that, you know, I mean, I'll be, you know, right back to the Bible again. They'll know you're Christians by your love, right? I mean, that's That's what it is. So I think a big part of how we evangelize in all of Catholic education is to love the kids, to show how God is an important part of our lives, and then to be welcoming and invite them into that relationship. And obviously there's the intellectual piece of it. You got to take theology all 4 years while you're here. So, you know, whether you're ever going to have a relationship with God or not, you're going to know something. The hope is that in the learning and the knowing, that helps build the relationship. But, making a kid memorize the 10 Commandments is not going to make them live them. That has to be much more of a welcome and an invitation. The 10 Commandments are a lovely guide to our lives, but knowing them doesn't change our lives. Living them changes our lives. So I think it's that combination of witness and welcome. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And the spaces thing is so true.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just think about people when they're trying to lose weight, whether they're trying to go to the gym, if the gym's super far away, or if they have a bunch of junk food in their house all the time and they're trying to eat healthy, but they're always reaching for the junk. If you have something that you could reach for the chapel, you could reach for Father Caddy, you can reach to the people, the campus ministry people, to guide you and just be there.
And you can kind of see it in like pockets of teachers too. It's like certain teachers that you just see kids attracted to them. And some of that is because they're into gaming and I'm into gaming, and so there's this attraction, right? I mean, so the attraction isn't always because of the God piece, but often it is. And even if the conversation isn't always or even is never around God, there's a draw to that way that person is in the world, that then can help lead to having someone you can talk to about the struggles in your life, the discernment you're doing with your life, where should I go to college, what should I study, I think I might want to be a nun. I mean, I've had kids show up at my office wanting to have that, and it's like, okay, let's put aside what I was about to do. We're about to have a very different conversation. So that those things happen, but it doesn't happen if you don't already create a welcoming relationship with someone. Yeah. So yeah,
that's huge. Are there any things that we haven't asked you that you feel like we should be asking you about?
Oh wow, good question. No. No, I mean, I think it's been a really great conversation. And I really, I'll be honest, I was telling someone this morning, they were like, did you prep for this thing? Because I was telling him I was doing this. Did you prep for this thing? I was like, well, he sent me the questions, but it's basically like talk about your life. I think you prep for it by living your life. So
exactly.
No.
We don't want staged answers
here.
They
definitely weren't staged answers. But having had the questions ahead of time was another source of prayer. So thank you for that, because it did give me a chance to kind of think about, stuff. So thanks for that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah. No, good luck for what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that there are young people like you who are trying to evangelize in 21st century ways, and I'm really hoping that you're reaching lots of people. So thanks for your ministry.
Thank you.